everyone, this is Devin Moreno and welcome to another Baltimore Investors video. And today I wanted to go ahead and talk about some of the ways that I get my tenants to pay the rent. See, that's a thing that new investors will have trouble with at first is, okay, how do I actually collect the rents? With only a couple tenants, it's fairly easy, but at this point I have 20 tenants that I manage and I cannot collect it in the traditional ways that you would, let's say, from your roommates. So here I'm going to go into a list of ways that I have collected rent. Now keep in mind, this is not a comprehensive list of all the different ways that you can pay rent or receive rents from your tenant. These are the ways that I personally have done it and what I like about them and what I dislike about them and would I recommend it. So the first one I'm going to go into is cash. Now this one is a little bit of a false way to pay rent because I've actually never received rent this way. Why? It's because I absolutely refuse to collect money in cash. So I personally feel that cash not being tracked is quite a difficult issue when you're talking about evictions, when you're talking about the tenant even being able to later on lie and say that they did pay rent when they never did. How would you know? You don't have any record of them paying, and you could send a receipt every single time in the sense of a email or something like that, but reasonably it is an easy way for the tenant to simply say that they paid you and they didn't, or there's just no method of tracking whatsoever and it becomes a difficult problem. They can even accuse you of lying even though you're not. So that's one way I never collect rent is through cash. Now the second way to receive rents is checks. Now I personally don't like going around and gathering checks. The thing is, it puts a couple problems on you as a landlord. One, it takes forever and a ton of time to go around and collect all these checks and coordinate schedules and try to make sure that everyone pays on time. And it's a bit of annoying doing that. Also, it kind of plays in the power dynamic of you as a landlord, making it feel like that you have to come to them in order for them to pay you rent. It makes it almost feel like they kind of own you in this process. And yeah, sure, you could have them mail it, but then it could just not arrive, or, oh my goodness, I sent the money, where did it go? And there's no tracking, and then they have to send another one, and it's a way to delay rent payments in that way. The final issue I have with checks is whether or not the check is actually going to bounce. See, a lot of tenants, they kind of spend their money in such a way where they live paycheck to paycheck. So that means that the money could be there one moment and then they're overspending, not realizing they just spent the money they were supposed to pay you, and then your check bounces and you have a fee and then you have to collect that. So it is a bit of an annoying way. Now, when I was a tenant for my old previous landlord, did I pay with checks? Absolutely I did. And now, of course, the money arrived every time. So I'm not saying that you can't have tenants do this. I'm just saying that's not a way I prefer to have my rents paid. Now, if you're worried about the check bouncing bit, you could do it through money orders. And I will say that I have collected rents through money orders, and this is because of maybe certain tenants who didn't quite understand some of the methods of payment that I'm going to go into, which is the electronic versions of payments. Maybe they don't understand technology, or maybe even in some cases, and this happens in a lot of maybe lower income areas, especially in the city, is that they don't even have a bank account. A lot of what they do is all through cash, and they don't use a bank for any purpose at all, because for them, having a bank account is actually more expensive than simply not having a bank account, or maybe they don't trust the system, or whatever it is. So in that case, a money order, I suppose, is okay. I have collected them a couple times. It's a bit annoying to have to go and get the money order. In this case, I personally prefer not to have them mail it, because if it gets lost in the mail, then that's actually real money that's on the line. They're not going to be able to acquire that money back. And for you to tell them, well, you need to figure it out, they're not going to be able to pay your rent twice for you in that month because the money order got lost. So it's just not going to happen. So it does put you in this weird situation where you need them to either personally come and deliver it to you, or you need to go get it. If you're managing out of state, then hopefully you have a property management agent or someone else who can deposit that check for you. In my case, I do have properties that are a little further away, and therefore I have a split bank account with somebody else's name on it, and they can deposit the check for me and then wire me the rest of the money. through some sort of electronic app. Now, another way that is very popular, and this is more in the kind of seasoned landlord territory, is apps like Cozy or Buildium. So these, among many others, are property management applications, which I would recommend using. I actually use Cozy, and what it'll do is it will take the money from them and deliver it right to you, almost in an ACH sort of transaction. And Buildium is another software that does that. It's a little bit more expensive. Cozy is free, so that is one I would absolutely recommend. It will take you some time to get your money, though, this way. You see, Cozy will actually have to process the money from their account, and then what it'll do is say, hey, rent is due, would you like us to collect it? The tenant basically says yes, and then the money is withdrawn from their account, and then it says it's processing this. This will take Cozy about 6 days. It takes a little while. So what I would recommend doing is moving your mortgage payments back as far as possible. So let's say you have from the 1st to the 15th to pay your mortgage. We'll just automate it on the 15th. That way, the long delay times of Cozy aren't really getting in the way. Now, there are methods where it will allow you to get your money a little bit faster, where it'll say, oh, if you pay us $3 or some percentage fee to get the money faster. Just be a good business owner and account for the fact that your money is going to come late. Don't pay these ridiculous fees. I wouldn't absolutely recommend that at all. And if you end up paying them, then it's just like, okay, are you now just like your tenants where you're living paycheck to paycheck? Personally, I can pay all my mortgages even if my tenants have not paid any of their rent. It's not necessarily an issue, so I wouldn't bother paying those fees, but it is a way to get the money faster should you need it. So the next application that I use is called Venmo. So this is where I go into a lot of the different phone apps. I'm only going to go into 4 since I only use 4, but there are a lot of them out there. And Venmo is the one I most commonly use. This is due to the ease of setup, and it is pretty quick on its transactions, and they can't call back the money, which I'll go into in some of the other apps. So Venmo has a very easy to use interface. The only thing I would say about it is it actually disguises itself slightly as a social networking platform. This is the same way that Uber disguises itself as a social networking platform for riders and drivers. That way it cannot label itself as a taxi company and avoid some of the implications that come with that. Well, Venmo is doing the exact same thing. It wants to disguise itself as a social networking platform, so that way it doesn't have to do whatever it needs to do regarding if it was a money transaction sort of account. So you're going to see a lot of weird things on there where friends are paying friends and you get to share what you're paying each other, and it's kind of actually a little bit bizarre. Fortunately, Venmo has a way where you can set everything to private. And that way, you don't have to really worry about your tenants seeing that you paid your girlfriend pizza or boyfriend. And so it gets a little bit weird on the privacy. So what I do is basically set the little lock symbol in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, always to private. It's in my settings, and I never have to worry about it. Just have your tenants do the exact same thing when they're paying you rent. And now you have a long transaction history and this is, by the way, you can look this up online where you can see all of your transactions. However, you can only pay through the actual phone application. But as mentioned, this makes it very easy. They send you $1,000, they send you $900, however much the rent is, then you have it, and you can say transfer to my bank account. Personally, for record purposes, I only transfer it in the increments that they actually paid it. So Venmo will rack up the money. So let's say you have 3 tenants paying it once. You're suddenly going to have like a large amount of money in your bank account. I only transfer it to my bank in accordance to the amount that they actually sent. It takes a little bit more time this way, but I find the transactions to be a little bit smoother. I found it to be easier to manage. I go on my bank account and I'm like, oh, that's $950. I know what that was. I know who that was. So obviously the more tenants you get, the more ridiculous that method would become. So then options like Buildium will be better. However, for your first time, I find that a lot of newer age tenants are very familiar with phone apps and they're totally cool with using this method. So the next one I will go into is Cash App. Now, Cash App so far hasn't caused me any issues, but supposedly there is a way to actually rescind the money. So that means a tenant can pay you and then suddenly withdraw the money and you will never see it again. Even if you block Cash App from withdrawing the money, they'll just take it out of the next payment. So it's not really a way to get around that. Now, as far as I'm aware, I've tried it out and I haven't found a way personally to withdraw the money, but it has been on some investor forums, landlording forums, that it is possible to somehow withdraw the money. So just be careful about Cash App. Cash App's interface can be a little bit more annoying to use than Venmo personally, but the best part about Cash App is it functions exactly as what it is. It is a transaction sort of application that is meant about sharing the money. So you don't have to worry about, oh, are all my friends buying bar drinks and whatever. I don't know why Venmo does it that way and Cash App doesn't, but that is just something for you to know. So far I have one tenant who does pay through Cash App, and it has never been a problem for me. It is one that I could recommend. Now, PayPal gets a little bit trickier. I never use PayPal, and I'll tell you why. It's because it is so easy to retract the money. All they have to do is pay you as goods and services, and they can retract that money at any time. Simply, you didn't deliver the product. And so I would never use PayPal. Now, you could tell them to do it as friends and family, but the tenant's not going to want to do that because oftentimes they'll incur fees, which means they'll charge it as goods and services, and that means you incur fees. So it's really not a great platform to use for collecting rents. I personally would not recommend it at all. Even if you get around the fees, the more tenants you get, the more problematic this can become. And then PayPal sometimes has options like, oh, it forces it where you want to accept the transaction because you registered yourself as a business. So now the money can go back to the sender, and it gets a little bit complicated. I wouldn't recommend it. Sure, yeah, you have little neat features like you can send invoices, even though rent is not an invoice. It's kind of like a reminder, I guess you can use it as. But I still wouldn't recommend PayPal, if not for all those other reasons, specifically for the fact of fees, and they can take the money back. Now, Zelle is a great option as well. That is one that I have used, and I so far have loved it. It's actually pretty instantaneous. The money just kind of zips to the next bank account. Some tenants actually find this easier to use because a lot of banks like USAA and Wells Fargo have incorporated Zelle into their websites, which means they can easily send the money that way. Now, as far as I'm aware, the only way to do this is from individual to individual. Many business bank accounts do not have Zelle incorporated into it as of the recording of this video. So sometimes you would have to receive the money as you an individual and then shift it to your LLC, let's say if you have the company in that. So this is obviously a similar problem with the other phone apps, is the fact that you will have to receive the money as you, the individual. Now, the best part about Zelle and why I would recommend it above all other apps is, one, as far as I'm aware, there is no way to rescind the money back. Two, it is coming into business banking. So at a certain point, if not now, for some banks, you will be able to have your tenant transact the money directly to your LLC accounts, which is awesome. And it is fairly instantaneous. You see the money immediately in your account because it is verified on both ends. So personally, I would recommend Zelle above all the others. So that is it, everyone. Those are all the different ways that I get tenants to pay the rent. And let me know if there's any methods you use that you would actually recommend. Also, like this video if you love this type of content. I'm trying to help out new investors in what to expect. A lot of new investors really need these smaller tips like, okay, that's a small item. How do you get the tenants to pay rent? What is the most effective way to do it? So something I wanted to share with you all. So comment below, let me know, and let me know what you want to see next. And I will talk to you all really soon.